Thank you all for coming. Yeah, as Mark said, this was quite last minute, but we did submit this to DevOps and we have a lot of thoughts about this. So, yeah, hi, I'm Kate Stanley. I'm a software engineer working at Red Hat. I'm also a maintainer on the Strimzi open source project, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Gantigmaa Selenge, but I usually go by Tina, as Mark said. Yeah, I'm also a software engineer at Red Hat, and I regularly contribute to Strimzi and Apache Kafka.
So today we're going to talk about an open source journey from contributor to maintainer. So we're going to share our personal experiences with contributing to open source and then share some of our experience. So what we're hoping is if you've never contributed before, you're looking to improve your contributions, or you're wanting to work all the way to be a maintainer or a committer, that these are some of the tips that we've picked up and we wish we'd known a little bit earlier in our journey. Okay, so for myself, I first heard about open source when I came to a conference. So I went to the JFocus conference in 2016 and then actually to DevOps that same year. And the thing that really struck me was just how enthusiastic people were about these open source projects they were working on. It was something I hadn't come across yet. And continuing my experience, I then started contributing to open source projects and expanding my knowledge, expanding my network. And later on, speaking at more and more conferences, I became a Java champion and actually published a book as well about an open source project, which is Kafka Connect. And then finally, earlier this year, became a Strimzi maintainer. So for me, the really big thing about contributing to open source is it allows you to extend your knowledge. You're able to connect with people who are the best in the community of what they do. And it allows you to meet new people, to learn from them, and to discover new opportunities. I never would have got the job that I have at Red Hat if it wasn't for working on open source.
Right, so I started as a software engineer in 2016, and I attended my first conference in 2019, and that's when I was really exposed to open source culture, open source community, and it was really cool to see people coming together with same passion and same interest for the open source. So I really wanted to start contributing after that conference when I came back, and I started making a small contribution to Apache Kafka, which were like document improvements, small bug fixes. And I also presented at a conference for the first time in 2020, and I really like to come to this kind of conferences, talk to new people and network. And yeah, and so when I started in Red Hat 2023, I now full-time work on open source projects like Strimzi and Apache Kafka.
Okay, so you're interested in contributing, but there are actually loads of different ways that you can contribute to an open source project. So it's really easy to assume that the only way to contribute is through code, but actually reporting issues is really useful. Anytime you're using any open source software, if you come across a problem, whether it's in the code or even in the documentation, it's really useful if you can report that and then maybe even help to fix it. You can, of course, join the discussion. So that's how Tina and I first got started. We weren't necessarily contributing that much at the beginning, but we were talking about the open source projects that we were using. We were sharing our experiences, championing them, getting more people to come and use them. So that's really important. And you can also help with answering questions. So in Strimzi, we have our Slack channels, GitHub discussions, things like Stack Overflow. And the people contributing to the project have so much that they're trying to manage that it's really helpful if other people join in. But it's also just really great as a contributor and maintainer. If you see other people answering questions, it just gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. So do join the discussion, even if you're not actively contributing code. And then, of course, you can contribute code as well. So how do we go about choosing our first issue?
Right, so this will be more based on the code contributions. It can be quite overwhelming and difficult to know where to start. So projects usually have Jira issues or GitHub issues that are labeled as good starter or newbie. So you can pick up those. They are usually documentation improvements. Like I said, that's how I started. And it's a very good way to start while you're learning about the project itself. And also missing unit tests, small bug fixes, simple refactoring. And so don't be afraid to ask for help from the community, like Kate said, via like Slack channels and mailing threads, because maintainers and contributors are usually very welcoming to the new joiners, and they're very keen on growing the community.
Okay, so you've chosen your first issue, you've maybe worked on it a little bit. How do you actually go about contributing? Now, this is only a 15-minute talk, so we're not going to go through the whole process, but we are going to give a couple of tips around pull requests. So there was actually a really good talk on this yesterday that I would definitely check out that really focused on writing a good pull request. But some of the things to be aware of are, look at the project checklist. So many projects have a template as part of their pull request. So when you create the pull request, there'll be a checklist of things you need to do. So maybe add into the changelog what the change was, run tests, documentation, that sort of thing. So make sure you've reviewed that and you've done everything that they've requested. You should also review your own request. So this is something that I find especially useful. Once you create the pull request, you can go back and look at the changes, and it's a really good way to catch things like unexpected white space that accidentally snuck in, or if there's any pieces of code that you think actually wouldn't make sense to somebody just reviewing it fresh. It can be useful to add comments or further context in the description just to make sure that people reviewing it understand what you're trying to do. Think about the project style. On one of my early open source projects, we experienced something where somebody opened a pull request to change all of the spaces to tabs, which was quite a lot of changes. And they then also moved everything one level down. So it was the entire code base had changed, but also it was just white space, and it was just a bit of a nightmare to review. And ultimately, it was never really going to get in because the project had already agreed the style, and we decided on spaces and we decided on the project structure. So do be aware of the project style and try and keep within it. And if you do that, it'll just mean you won't get those extra comments from maintainers or contributors saying, oh, can you do it like this? Because this is the way we do it in this project. And then, of course, making sure that when you open your pull request, you have a very clear title, description, any context. Make sure you're linking to other issues. You can add things like closes issue number X, and that just really helps to kind of keep the flow of the project. With all of these, it can be really good as well just to check previous pull requests that have been merged to see what other people are doing and just get an idea of how this particular project works. Okay, so you've done your first pull request, it got merged. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, so if you have completed quite a few good starter issues, now looking to work on something a bit more difficult, more interesting, and you want to grow your skills more, so you want to work on something more difficult. So think about what's important for the project. Projects tend to have roadmaps. So for example, Streamzy has a roadmap on GitHub you can check out. And it's really good to pick up an issue from the roadmap. That means those are the high priority issues, and you will get quicker feedback, quicker reviews that way. If you pick up an issue like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you might not get much attention on it, and your PR might just get stuck there for a while. But that's not to say don't pick up an older issue. There are still like valuable Jira issues that you can pick up that maybe not on the roadmap or maybe like a couple of years older. Also, talking to key contributors can be very, very helpful. From my experience, that's how I found some very interesting issues to work on. When I was talking to some contributors that I knew, they'd be like, oh yeah, I raised this issue a while ago, but I didn't have time to work on it. Do you want to pick it up? So that's how I found some very interesting issues to work on. And that way also you can build relationship with them. And by building relationship, you can also find a mentor that way. And having a mentor who can guide you in the open source community can be really, really helpful, especially if you have a goal of becoming a maintainer one day. And yeah, so
once you've worked on those particular issues and you're looking at getting a pull request accepted, what we found is that the first few pull requests you make, because they're so small, they'll probably go in pretty quickly. But what we've often found is once you start progressing to those more tricky issues, it can be quite tricky to get them in. So there's just some things that are worth considering. And the main thing around this is that often maintainers or committers are very busy. So always thinking about how can you help them. So my experience, having gone from developing in more closed source, where it was within my own team, and then moving to open source, the main thing I experienced was it just takes so much longer to get code in when you're doing it in open source. So there are some things we can do to help speed up the process. So the first thing is to keep pull requests really focused. As a maintainer, if I see a really big pull request, I know that's going to take me a lot of time to get through, so I need to carve out a lot of time to get through it. So I would much rather have smaller requests that are for a specific issue each than a load of changes in one big issue that is then I'm going to have to carve out a bunch of time to get to. So keeping your pull requests as focused as you can is really, really helpful. Definitely reach out and sort of prompt people if you're not getting much traction on your issues, but do give them time. So when I was in a more closed source environment, I would kind of expect maybe a review in like a day or so, unless I knew that, someone was away on holiday. But actually in the open source community, it's fairly common, I think, for it to be like a week, 2 weeks, maybe longer for people to get to your review, especially if it's a really big one, because the maintainers might not be there. They might not actually be working on this project full time. They might be doing it evenings and weekends. So just accept that there will be that extra time. But also what you can do is then address the comments really promptly. So the reason I say this is around context switching. Often the contributors and maintainers are reviewing pull requests across the entire project, so lots of different areas. And it can take a long time, especially with a big change, to get all of that context into your head. If you've then reviewed something and somebody updates it, and you can look at it again the next day, you've probably still got that context, and so you can quite quickly get back to it and re-review it. Whereas if it's been a week or so since you looked at it, you're going to need more time to get back up to speed and remember what the change was in the first place. So do remind the maintainers, but give them their time. But if you can address the comments really promptly, then that's great. We do sometimes find in the Strimsy project that people create a pull request, and then it does take us a bit of time to get to it, but then we actually never hear back from them. And I find that really sad, because I really want contributors to contribute, and I want to get to your pull request really quickly, but I just don't have all of the time in the world. So do bear this in mind. So then finally, talking about adding more complex tasks.
Right. So when you want to add a new feature, projects usually require a proposal to be written so that enough maintainers and contributors can discuss and agree and accept it before it can get implemented. So usually projects will have a template for writing the proposal. This is an example for Strimsy. This is just a template to start where you can add more sections, you can change it around, but you need to make sure you're capturing the context and then the motivation why you want to solve this problem, and all the necessary information. You can add more like sections that could be useful is feature improvements. So maybe there are some other problems, the related problems that you want to solve, but you want to have the proposal focused on one problem. Or rejected alternatives. They usually, maybe you consider other solutions and you decided not to go with it, so you can explain why you didn't choose those solutions. So I already mentioned, you want to define the scope. You don't want to try to solve too many problems, so that then the discussion is not going to be productive. You want to have a more focused discussion. More productive, as Kate said, maintainers don't have enough time to discuss too many things. And also you want to balance the implementation details versus ease of reading. So in the past, I've done that mistake myself, adding way too many implementation details in my proposal. And most of the discussions were around small details that were not as important for the whole bigger picture of the problem. And also you want to make it easier to read, as Kate already said, like maintainers might go away and review other stuff and might have to come back. You want to make it easier for them to refresh their memory. You don't want them to read another 20 pages to be able to remember what this was.
So around this, one of the main things we want you to take away is often in an open source project can take a while to get changes in a shape that makes sense. Many open source projects are quite scared of risk. They don't want to take a big risk because their project is used by many different people in many different ways. So a change that to you seems like, well, this would be perfect and beneficial could actually be detrimental to other people. So as an example, I tried to add some certificate management to Strimzi, and I had one proposal that was really abstract and trying to kind of encapsulate too many things at once and make it so we could add any certificate management, and that didn't really get any traction. We couldn't agree. So I then raised another proposal that was really specific and just adding a very small change that I knew would eventually get to me adding a certificate manager. But again, this one got closed because it was way too specific and nobody could understand how it got to my end vision. So in the end, I had to create one which was more scoped. It was specifically about the tool cert manager, but it wasn't that fine-grained. So it can take a long time for you to find that piece. So if you are struggling to get traction, do talk to the community to make sure this is a feature that they want, but it can take a bit of time to kind of find the right shape that it makes sense for the community, because ultimately they're doing it not just for you as an individual, but for the whole community. So with that, a quick summary. There are so many ways to contribute. Please go and contribute to your open source projects that you use. They're always keen for more contributors. And do connect with the community. Any change that you make in the code, ultimately you need a person to buy into that. So talking to the community and getting to know people is really good. And it does take time, so do try and be patient. If you want to check out Strimzi, it's a Kubernetes operator for running Kafka. And thank you very much.
Thank you.